Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Adam Caplan is co-host of the Inside the Birds podcast. You can find that on any podcasting platform or on their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. You know what? Let's go inside the Birds and find out what's going on with this team. The coordinators both speaking today, and we've got issues that we want to try to clear up on this football team. Adam Caplan is here to try to do it for us as he joins us here on Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Well, Adam, we've got issues. 2 straight losses. I guess, are these fixable issues, or do you watch this team and say you've got legitimate concerns about the issues they have?
You know, Mike, that was a big focus of today's Inside the Bird show, which you could find on any platform, YouTube channel, of course, and any podcasting platform. And, you know, we've tried to tell people, look, you got to understand, this is not last year's team. And people thinking like, okay, well, they could turn it around, they could be better. They're 7 games over 500. You know, if they win the rest of their games, they'll tie last year's record. Were they 14-3? Does that sound right? Something like that?
Yeah, last year, 14-3.
Right. So, look, the bottom line is we told people before the season started, we're very clear about this. This team will not be anywhere close to as good as last year in terms of talent. It doesn't mean that they couldn't go far in the playoffs and potentially make the Super Bowl. But you got to be realistic, Mike. If you include Avonte Maddox, they're now down 6 starters from last year's team. That's a lot on defense. That's hard to overcome. So now I get the negativity. I mean, it's as you know, Mike, it's on overdrive now. People are so upset. They feel deceived. They feel they should have been better. How did they get blown out twice? Well, folks, we could talk about the offensive, defensive schemes, play calling, play design, all that stuff. That's fine. I think that some of it is valid. Some of it's a little bit over the top. But you got to start with the talent level of this team. It's not as good as last year, and that's where I would start.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. You know, you take a look at this team, the expectations, and then, of course, they get out to that great start, and you start to, I guess, almost forget that there were so many changes on this team. But another blowout loss. How big were the turnovers? Let's start there for the reason for that. I watched the Niner game and say they just got outplayed. They got beat by a better team on that Sunday. And then you get concerned because, like, you got blown out again. But are the turnovers why you are a big reason why you got blown out, or is Dallas just a superior football team? Seemingly like San Francisco was the week before.
Yeah, I think you set that up right. Yeah, the Niners outplayed them. They were the better team coming in. I picked the Niners to win that game, and for the record, I did pick the Eagles to beat Dallas. It was just more about Hurts had not lost back games as a starter since the 21 season, and I know Dallas they've kind of feasted on bad teams. Now, let's focus on the latter part of what you were talking about, which I think is important. If they didn't turn the ball over 3 times, I still believe they would have lost because, Mike, their defense was better in the second half, no doubt. Dallas didn't have a touchdown in the second half. You know, it's subjective to say, well, Dallas took off the pedal. How would no one knows? And I understand why people would say it, and I've seen the comments out there. But the bottom line is they get off to a terrible start defensively, which has really, quite frankly, been mostly their MO. Other than the Niners game, remember, they shut down the Niners for 1 quarter, -6 yards, and then they got taken to the woodshed after that. But really, since that Miami game, this defense has been on a downward cycle. So in the end, Mike, when you look at this situation on defense, it was the 3 turnovers, also putting the defense in a bad spot. But the bottom line is the defense got off a terrible start. I mean, Dallas went down, and I remember texting with someone about this during the game. The lack of resistance by the defense on that first drive was ridiculously bad. That's the stuff that we could talk all we want about. The defense isn't good enough, the talent level isn't good enough, and there's certainly truth to that. But you got to be more competitive than that, and that's on the defense coordinator Sean Desai, who did speak today.
He did speak today. He mentioned Ringo and Smith, 2 younger players, a little faster. Because I was going to say, you watch a game, and I see one thing was evident there, that their back seven's pretty slow. I mean, they just are not very athletic and fast in that secondary. And Adam, you take a look at some of the questions about this team on the defense. They struggled early in that game. They did get some stops later on in the game. Man, they do look slow at times.
They are. And you know what's interesting about James Bradbury, Mike? I don't know if you know this. Bradbury came to Samford, where he played college as a receiver. So it's kind of odd that, he slowed down so much here. Now, Slay was always known coming out of Mississippi State with his speed. And it's not like he's slow, but you could say he's half a step under Johnson and Marcus Epps. They're just not the same secondary. That's the other part of this. That's the big deal. And Gardner Johnson was one of the best playmaking safeties. And yeah, the Eagles did try to sign him. The last offer they made him was a 3-year deal, but they and the other teams look at it the same way. They didn't want to pay him off of 1 year being a safety. And unfortunately, he got hurt with Detroit, but they've not adequately replaced him, Mike. It's just, that's the other thing we don't talk about. Where are the playmakers on this defense? That's another part of what that people don't mention. Who are the guys who are going to make that play? They don't have that guy right now.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson had, 6 interceptions last year, and he missed 5-6 weeks, and he still was able to be a big playmaker for you. You just haven't got those turnovers and fumbles, and quite frankly, you're not getting to the quarterback nearly as consistently as you were last year either.
Yeah, it was interesting how Zach Berman had that note, I couldn't verify. I haven't had time to verify it, so I'm assuming he's correct that the Eagles are number one in sacks on first and second down and worst, and 32nd on third down. Now, we know they have the worst third down percentage in the National Football League. In terms of stopping the other team, it's terrible, but that's really bad that they have the lowest sack percentage. It is really interesting. We knew that. Look, they weren't going to get 70 sacks this season. I thought they might get in the 40s, and they still might. But sacks are individual plays. The pressure numbers are just not good enough. They don't make the quarterback move off the spot, folks. When you watch the game, you could chart it on your own. You can't chart it totally off of television. You can't see everything. It's impossible. But when you're watching, just get a general idea when you're watching. If you felt watching the game that the Eagles moved the quarterback off their spike last season. I would say they don't for the most part, and that's a big problem.
Well, I'll tell you some pressure numbers, Adam. Their pass rush this year, they're 29th in pressure percentage this season. They were 6th last year. Their pressure percentage has dropped from 32 to 25. Only Washington is worse in terms of a drop-off. So the numbers of pressure that they're getting – it's one thing to get sacks. They got last year. Sometimes pressure equals, turnovers. They're not getting the pressure to force turnovers either.
No, you're right. Now, again, though, having a ball hawk like Gardner Johnson, who's incredible at tracking the football, they don't have that guy. So I just want to bring this all up, Mike, because I think fans had unrealistic feelings about this football team. They should have really looked at the roster first. You always start with personnel first. That's how you evaluate a football team, and you act accordingly. I know they wanted to walk away from some contracts, but they're just, offensively, almost everyone's back. Say Amalo and Miles Sanders are gone, but that doesn't explain the offensive issues the last couple of weeks. But again, as you said, you talked to me at the top here. Those 3 turnovers were problematic because they were moving the football. That was, I would say, in this game, that wasn't the issue. It was the turnovers. We'd like to see a little bit more creativity, though. That's some of the people we spoke to this week around the league mentioned that they need to move this thing going forward a little bit.
Would you be surprised if I told you, Adam, Dallas ran 22 more plays and only gained 70 more yards. They had the ball for 13 extra minutes and only outgained them by 70 yards. That's how big those 3 turnovers were.
That was part of the 3 turnovers were huge. And Bob, let me add this, okay? I'm going to add something to what you just said. How about the drop passes? That A.J. Brown pass, beautifully thrown on that right sideline, right through his hands. If you watch the replay, it was really damning. Brown does not have Devontae Smith's hands, and obviously Devontae had a drop, which I'm sure he'd like to have back. But that's something A.J. Brown's got to take a look at himself here. That's a concentration drop. It's rare that you see a ball go right through somebody's hands, but it sure did.
Adam Caplan, Inside the Birds podcast. You can listen to on all podcasting platforms. So now here's Philadelphia, San Francisco, and Dallas. They're the 3 teams that most people – and by the way, they're probably still the top 3 teams in the league. Where do they rank out of the 30? You might like Baltimore. So where do you put Philly now in your hierarchy?
All right, so I did a little mini. Moshe put me on the spot last night, which was fine. I enjoyed the little exercise. So you said, I used to do our rankings for our power ranks for InsideTheBirds.com, and I said, it's clearly Baltimore's the best team. Now, ironically, who plays Baltimore next week? The Niners in Week 16. I believe that game's in Santa Clara. That'll be a great game, no question about it. So I would go Niners 1, Ravens 2. They barely beat the Rams last week, but they found a way to win. The craziness of the rain there, and they were still able to move the football, which is interesting. So Rams took them to the limit for sure. Then after that, like Miami, it's interesting. Miami had been playing well for so long. Now Tyreek Hill misses 2.5 quarters in that game, and you saw how bad their offense bogged down. It's funny how, and it's fair, people brought up that only 3 guys really caught the football against the Cowboys for the Eagles. Mm-hmm. Well, you take away Tyreek Hill, and look, he's the best receiver in the league. They could not move the football. I mean, they're cruising along, Mike. They're cruising along in that game. Tyreek Hill comes back late, then they go off, and they go up 2 touchdowns and then choke the lead. I still think, and Vic Fangio's defense have been playing very well for a couple months, but they struggled late against Will Levis. It was kind of interesting. I do like Miami at 3. They're still going to be very, very good. Tua's doing a good job this year, certainly in the running for the MVP. I reluctantly put Dallas at 4. Look, that was a very convincing win for me over Philly. And then I put the Eagles at 5. I still think they're good. They're a good football team. There's no question. I mean, you saw what they did against Miami. I know it was a long time ago, but you saw them at their best. That's what they can do.
It's funny you had that. I have Dallas. I have San Francisco, Dallas, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Detroit. I don't even have. I mean, Philly showed Miami some blueprints there. I still like Detroit. I know they looked a little bit off this past week, but. To me, that tells you what the league is right now. There's really the 2. You got San Francisco, Dallas, Philadelphia, the AFC. I mean, Baltimore still gives me weird vibes. They have 3 losses, and they are not good losses. Their losses were bad losses.
Well, and Mike, one thing about Detroit is their pass rush is awful. They don't blitz anywhere near the amount as they did earlier last season when they played the Eagles. Remember in Week 1 when they were just blitzing almost every play, and it just didn't work. But no, they're a fun team to watch, but they're in a regression. And one of the reasons why I told fans that this team would not be as good but could still make it to the Super Bowl, the rest of the league wasn't that good. That's turned out to be true. Now, the Niners are clearly the best team. They're not dominant. They did have a 3-game losing streak, but they're a very good football team, well coached. The quarterback's playing outstanding football. He'll be up there for MVP. But all's not lost. There are 4 games left. And the thing is, now I know they haven't beaten Seattle in the last 7 starts, but I'm guessing Russell Wilson started most of those games, so let's look at context here.
Do you know who the last quarterback in Seattle, Philadelphia beat, Adam Caplan?
You mean that the Eagles beat?
Yeah, who's the last Seattle quarterback that Philadelphia beat?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm gonna guess it can't be Matt Flynn, was it?
Nope. Seneca Wallace was the quarterback in 2008. That is the last time Philadelphia was able to beat them. And look, they've lost 4 in a row. They've never lost 5 straight with Pete Carroll as the coach. That's what you're up against. And by the way, Adam, we're talking about where the Eagles rank. Seattle right now, they desperately need to win this game if they want to be a playoff team. I mean, if they lose this game, their percentage goes down to about 5%. But if they win this game, they have about a 40% chance of making the playoffs. So this game is almost bigger for Seattle in terms of making the playoffs. Philadelphia is essentially a playoff team. It's just going to be how good of a playoff team.
Right, and remember, the Eagles and Seahawks they don't practice till Thursday. And also, Geno Smith, this is big. Though Drew Lock probably played one of the best games of his career against the Niners. He actually played competent football. Geno Smith has got this groin injury, and they don't know if he's going to play. I mean, they're more hopeful than they were last week because my understanding is when he came into their building Friday, it was bothering him. They didn't feel too bad about it after practice Thursday because he got hurt in Thursday's practice, but they knew it was going to be a problem Friday. He worked out before the game. He just couldn't go. We'll see about this week. Drew Lock, if he has to play, folks, has a big arm. He's got major accuracy issues. He's not an athlete. That's a guy that I know they can beat. And look, you're right, Seattle needs this game. And now it's interesting. And then Green Bay surprisingly lost to the Giants. So those two teams are neck and neck for one of those last wild card spots.
Yeah, the wild cards on both sides are just crazy right now. Let's a little quick. Philadelphia got beat up the last 2 weeks, but what's the injury situation look like after these two games?
Yeah, well, the big one is Reed Blankenship in concussion protocol. We'll see if he's out of it by tomorrow's practice, or if they let him. You could be in the protocol, but practice you would be limited. So we'll see what happens tomorrow when they return to practice for the first time, and that's a big one because if he doesn't play, it would be Sidney Brown, and they'd have to add another safety off the practice squad for depth. They don't have anyone else, Mike.
Wow.
That's a very thin position, which generally has been the case because Justin Evans will not return this season.
All right, Philadelphia and Seattle, Monday Night Football. They'll get one extra day to kind of get ready for this one. They'll fly out to Seattle, a place that has not been kind to anybody, really. And by the way, did you know this, Adam Caplan? The underdog, and Seattle is a 4-point dog in the game, the underdog in Monday Night Football games straight up is 6-0 over the last 5 weeks. There was 2 games this week, and the underdog has won straight up all 6 games on Monday Night Football. Throw that into the mix.
Good note.
If you will.
Good nugget.
Adam
Very
Caplan,
nice.
everybody. Don't forget, download the latest edition of the Inside the Birds podcast. You can find that on any podcasting platform, or just search for their YouTube channel. Search Inside the Birds. Adam, thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Adam is back on Friday's show to give us the injury updates and everything more, the matchups he's watching. That's all right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.